Good afternoon. We want to thank each and every one of you for coming here today. I want to thank my colleague and friend, Mayor James Perkins of Selma. I want to thank our respected police chiefs for being here from the city of Montgomery and the city of Selma, and many others who are a part of our fight to reduce gun violence in our communities. This is Gun Violence Awareness Month, and it's something that we take very seriously, that we try to work on each and every day, even as we spotlight it this month. Mayor Perkins reached out to me some time ago and discussed doing a joint appearance and press conference to really address the issue of gun violence that we are seeing across not only our community but across this state and this nation. And given his track record and his time of service, I thought it would be a great idea for us to partner and for us to come and share some thoughts that we have, as well as some initiatives that we would like to propose in the future as action steps for us to fully address this. And I do this with all sincerity and appreciating each and every person in our communities that is helping us on the ground, not just those that are in uniform, but those that are assisting us through their houses of worship, through their nonprofits, through community organizing, and all of the other individual initiatives that we see and don't see in our community. So with that, I want to ask Mayor Perkins to come up and give you some remarks, and I'll conclude with my remarks, and we'll take any questions at that time. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mayor Reed, it's always good to be in Montgomery with you, and both chiefs are here. I'm not going to rattle off a lot of statistics, nor am I going to address any specific gun-related crime. My purpose for joining with my friend and colleague, the Honorable Stephen Reed, during this press conference is to speak to the frustrations, the setbacks, and the misery index resulting from gun violence within our communities. But statistically, politically, and emotionally speaking, I'm convinced that we, across this nation, I'm convinced that what we are doing across this nation, that's including my own community, what we're doing is not working. The sheer numbers of gun violent deaths confirm that what we are doing is simply not working. In Selma, 14 murders in the last 6 months. 13 of those murders were gun-related. I'm just convinced that what we're doing is not working. The lack of a legal solution that is at least slowing down these tragedies confirm that what we are doing is simply not working. Law enforcement personnel at all levels are telling me that this permitless carry law makes it nearly impossible to execute preventive policing of illegal guns and the illegal use of guns. The number of parents who are burying their children because of gun violence confirms to me that what we're doing is simply not working. The youngest to be killed from illegal gun activity in Selma was 5 years of age this year. Nationally, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, that is a bold first step, but it's not enough. One observation I make about this crisis within America is that we have not done a good job of listening. What do I mean by that? We need to do a better job of listening to victims. When I say we, I mean federal, state, local, executive, judicative, and legislative government officials, all of us, we need to press the pause button and stop and listen. We need to really listen to mothers and fathers who have had to bury their children. because of some senseless act of gun violence. We need to listen to children and parents who are suffering from anxiety over the risk of sending their children to school. We need to listen to families and elders who are afraid to go to church for fear of some deranged individual with some military-style weapon randomly shooting people down within the sanctuary. We need to listen to the people who we vowed to serve. We made a commitment to serve them, and we need to listen to each other more. Recently, I had a conversation with a gentleman whom I respect him, and he is a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, the constitutional right to keep and to bear arms. He's a very strong supporter, and two things happened in that conversation. First, I actually took the time to listen to him passionately share his position, and I realized that really his bottom line was that he simply does not want to be disarmed and left defenseless against a potential armed person with illegal intent. And so, I kind of agree with him about that. In addition to me listening to him, though, I insisted that he listen to me. And I passionately shared with him my position, and my bottom line was not to disarm him nor me, because I own guns. I'm not interested in disarming him, but the bottom line was to disarm those who should not have a gun. And we need stronger laws, and we need to strengthen law enforcement to accomplish both of those goals. But also, I challenge anyone to help me understand, and I challenge him to help me understand the need for military-style assault weapons on the streets in our communities. That conversation left me thinking. It left me thinking. I really was thinking about, would it be actually possible to have the that same private discussion in a public space? Would that individual be willing to actually go into a public space and have this conversation? But yet, could we possibly just pull together people with opposing views on this, about this issue, to kind of listen to victims, to listen to those people who are suffering from the lack of decisions and the kinds of decisions that are being made? And those of you who follow my public life, you know that I pretty much like to go big. Y'all know that. But my first thought was to actually pull a lot of people in the room together, get all the associations together, Mayor, and then have a big conversation. But I decided instead to actually start small. And so I reached out to my colleague and friend, Mayor Reed, with a phone call. It started with him listening to me and me listening to him. Why did I choose him? Well, I chose him because Montgomery is a metropolitan and Selma is a micropolitan. I chose him because Montgomery is urban and Selma is somewhere between urban and rural. I chose him because Montgomery is a large city, is the largest city in the state to the east of Selma, and Selma is the largest city in the state to the west of Montgomery. We're neighboring cities. That's why I chose him. And we share portions of the 7th Congressional District. As mayors do, I reached out and I shared my concerns about this issue. And I actually floated the idea of making a public statement about this together. And here we are. And now that we're here, the question should be, well, what's next? After we finish this conversation, after we finish having this press conference, what can be done that we have not done prior? And so Mary and I, when we talked, we kind of come to a consensus that the next step should be to actually invite federal, state, local, executive, judicative, and legislative government officials, federal, state, local law enforcement officials, business executives, educators, and faith leaders, not to talk about the problem, but to listen to the victims. Listen to people who are caught up in our inability to make decisions to address this issue. So let me just be clear. This is not a Montgomery or a Selma problem. This is a national crisis. in which Montgomery and Selma are caught up in, and as mayors, Mayor Reed and I are simply encouraging and inviting a discussion. A discussion that hopefully, when we come together, that we will be willing to listen to those people who are suffering, and to participate, following that, to participate in a public conversation. Not behind closed doors, but a public conversation. After we listen to the public, have a public conversation, public officials, faith leaders, business community, have a public conversation about our position so that we can be heard. Let's put some transparency on this. Let's see where everyone actually stands. Let's listen to one another. And I'm convinced that if we do that, and we do that honestly and genuinely, we will be able to address some of the frustrations, setbacks, and the misery index that's resulting from all of this violence. Now, before you ask me, know that at this point, we do not have any details. What we have is a commitment to extend an invitation. We have a commitment to try to convene people to a listening summit. We do not have time. We don't have the time designated. We don't have a location set. We don't have a budget. We haven't done any of that because it's going to take some collaboration and some additional work to do all of that. But the goal right now is to do the clarion call, to speak publicly about our desire and intent to have a serious public conversation about this issue. It's my hope that the media, that you, the fact that you're here, will be our friend, and that you allow to help us get this message out. It's my hope that our colleagues, our cohorts, and victims, regardless of whatever position that we have on these issues, embrace this vision and actually volunteer to support and to participate. I think we're better than this crisis. I think in this nation, I think we as a people, we are better than this. And we must do better than we are doing. Those are my comments. I want to thank you again, Mary, for standing with me on this and us standing together to work on this issue. It is my hope that people will hear us.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank Mayor Perkins for his leadership and for his initiative to reach out. None of us can do this by ourselves, but we do believe that through our platforms and through our ability to convene, we do have an opportunity to reach out to people from all backgrounds and from all areas across our region to really address this topic. And, you know, one of the things that Gun Violence Awareness Month does is it highlights the challenges seen across this country from gun violence. In fact, this month we will don an orange light to honor the victims of gun violence across the country. And we do this, again, to raise awareness of the efforts at the national level to stop this pain and loss associated with gun violence. Last year, President Biden signed into law the most significant gun violence reduction legislation enacted in the last 30 years. And we know that there's still more work to do. He and the Vice President have committed to continuing their work, but they also need Congress to act by implementing common sense gun laws, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, requiring gun owners to securely store their firearms, requiring background checks for all gun sales, repealing gun manufacturers' immunity from liability. We also see the need for more governors and more state legislators to step up. Often they pass the bills, but it's the mayors and the city council and the police chiefs and the officers who have to deal with the questions. And what we're starting to see is more non-fatal shootings. That coincides directly with the permitless carry bill that was passed, not just here in Alabama, but in legislatures across this country. We've seen that rate increase 40%, but gun arrests are down. because everybody has now this right to carry, irrespective of a permit or not. And even though we've taken 900 guns off the streets through gun buyback programs and other initiatives, we're still seeing guns play too much of a role in disputes and arguments. As my chief says to me consistently, regularly, there's a lack of conflict resolution ability and skills in today's environment. No one wants to be shown up, and no one wants to be last to pull their gun because they believe the other person has one. And so I think that we have a responsibility that doesn't just start and stop in Selma and Montgomery. It doesn't just start and stop with mayors or city councils or even police chiefs. We have a responsibility from the private sector to government officials to really take a look at what has been happening here and this fascination with gun culture that America has. What it's costing us in terms of lives, what it's costing us in terms of trauma, what it costs us in terms of overall impact on our communities. We've tried to be proactive by creating an Office of Violence Prevention. Our director is here, and our our assistant is here as well in that department. But we also have our city council who's helped fund it and has helped us expand it as well. Saw Councilor Mitchell walk in. I want to thank him for the work that he has done. But when we think about the Office of Violence Prevention, it is a small office that's just setting up shop. And what they have been able to do is to go door to door and talk to people in the communities, to ask what's happening and how we can get in front of the next one. What can we do? How can we collaborate with those that are in communities that feel like no one hears their pain or no one hears the trauma that they have? And I want to say that although small, this department has, I think, taken on a mighty responsibility and has done yeoman's work in getting that accomplished. But we're also working with Crime Stoppers. We're expanding our technology through ShotSpotter and StarWatch camera networks. We're hiring new police officers, investing in early intervention programs. There are also plans to work with faith leaders like Pastor Ed Nettles to talk about a summit, to have a, if you will, off-the-record conversation about how we minimize these type of interactions. And at the community level, from our standpoint, Mayor, like many of us, we're trying to rebuild and reprogram many of our community centers with wraparound services, because we understand that we have to create safe spaces for people to talk, for people to interact with one another, for us to collaborate in a way that doesn't put anyone at jeopardy or risk of sharing what they know. We want to get our officers more engaged in the community through the Police Athletic League, but also through other initiatives as well with youth, sports, and programming. And so all of these are just a few of the things that we're working on. And I want to certainly applaud both chiefs of police that we have here, but particularly Chief Albert, for working to change some of our structure and personnel processes to recruit and retain great candidates for our police department. It's a challenging environment nationally to recruit police officers. There are a number of reasons for that. And so we don't want our communities to turn into where people feel like they have to take the law into their own hands each and every time they have an interaction with someone, or whenever they may just be going out for a run, they may be going to shopping, they may be going just to pick up groceries. We know that we have to have great people in law enforcement, and there are great people currently doing that work right now. But we also realize we've got to have the help from the ground up as well as from City Hall down to really meet the moment. And so Mayor Perkins and I wanted to join together today to talk about these ideas, to bring it to the attention of our respective communities, to the state as well, and to make sure those that are in the communities understand we understand and really hear your frustration. We feel your hurt and your pain, those that have lost loved ones, and we want to do everything we can to try to rectify that. And it's going to take everyone being consistent and being committed in order to do just that. And so I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of you for the work that you do in our communities, being eyes where we can't see and being ears where we can't hear. All of those things are necessary in order to make our communities safer and to allow people to reach the full potential that God has given them. And we believe this is the start of a very important collaboration that will move forward with action steps soon to come. And it's one that we welcome feedback and we welcome interaction. No different than many of us will ask to support positive initiatives and things that are fun. And we want you to come out to the 4th of July parade and other things that we may have in our communities. We want the community to come out to talk about serious matters just like this. Because whether you're in City Hall in Montgomery, Alabama, or City Hall in Selma, Alabama, or anywhere in between, you're hearing many of the same comments from the community. How can we stop the gunshots? How can we stop the gun violence? And what are you going to do in order to fix that? And we're here today to say that we're committed to being change agents in this area and making sure that our communities are safer and that we listen, as Mayor Perkins said, to those who've been impacted directly and indirectly, and that we listen to those who feel like this is the only way they know to try to provide another outlet or another pathway for them. And I thank you for giving us your time and attention today. And again, just want to thank you for all the effort that you all put in across this state and for all the effort that you all put in each of our respective communities. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks and I'll open it up for any questions that any member of the press may have.
Mayor, if you could, real quick, just talk a little bit about the fact of what can be done as you talk to the delegation up in D.C. About loosening the grip that the NRA and some other organizations have on this Second Amendment conversation, because we've seen school shootings where family members cry out for help from the legislative side, only to have them go back to D.C. and not do anything about it. So what is being done to loosen that grip?
You know, we're working with organizations such as Everytown USA and Moms Against Illegal Guns and many other organizations try to keep the pressure on Congress. Right now it's decidedly tough, given that you have a Democratic majority in the United States Senate and a Republican-controlled majority in the House of Representatives. But, you know, I quite frankly don't see this as a partisan issue. I think everyone wants to have a safe community. I work with mayors all around this country of various political backgrounds, and we all want the same thing because we know our residents want peace and quiet, and they want a safe community. I think it's unfortunate that we allow any one lobby or any organization to drive as much of the conversation around what are common sense gun reforms that most of Americans, by the way, of both political parties and those that are independent, back and control. I think until one or two things happen, either American people step up and decide that this is an issue that they are going to make a decision about in terms of who they support and who they don't at the ballot box, or whether or not communities such as ours decide that, and around the country decide that maybe you have to hit the gun manufacturers in their pockets. Maybe you have to do with them no different than what communities did with tobacco the tobacco industry decades ago, and certainly doing with pharmaceutical companies now as it relates to opioids and other initiatives. Maybe it's time for those class action lawsuits to be brought in to really challenge the immunity of these manufacturers if you cannot get to the greater good and the will of Congress to see the benefits of what would be some common sense gun reforms, in my opinion.
If I can, just to follow up, how frustrating is it on the local level when you hear politicians campaign on being tough on crime, but then they pass laws like not needing a permit to carry? It's an understatement to hear those many of the politicians talk about being tough on crime, but make it harder on our men and women who are wearing the badges to do their job, and make it more dangerous, by the way, as well. I don't think one would expect that if I had this entire city hall lined with firecrackers that there might be some noises that would happen. Why is that? Because you've got the entire city hall lined with firecrackers. Well, if you put more and more guns and you allow easier access to guns and we do some other things in this country, then why are we surprised that there are more shootings? Why are we surprised that there are more non-fatal shootings and more homicides? It is a problem. It is reckless, in my opinion, for those legislators at all levels to campaign on that. It's disingenuous for them to take that approach, because ultimately it's those of us at the local level who have to deal with it, and in particular, it's our men and women and children in our communities who are really the ones who have to deal with the fallout. And I think from my perspective, the politicians at the state level who pass permitless carry bills, not just here in Alabama, but in many other states, have a responsibility to their residents, to their constituents in their districts, to explain that. And one of the things that we often share here in City Hall for those that come and talk to us about the gunshots is, yes, we hear them, yes, we want to fix that, yes, we want to eliminate it, and we want to find the perpetrators who are doing those things, because we know bullets have no name and they know no political party. But at the same time, we need those that same effort and energy in our state houses when the legislature is in session for part of the year. We don't have that freedom and flexibility to take part of the year off and go into places where we aren't seen and heard. As mayors and the city council people, we have to look the public in the eye each and every day, but yet we have no control over the laws that our police officers are expected to uphold. So it's a major issue, and in my opinion, it's something that not only the community and voters and neighbors have to rally around, but I think the business community plays a role in that. And I think the business community and the private sector has to make a decision on the type of environment that they want to be in and the type of community that they want to see as well. And I want to also ask Mayor Perkins, he may have some comments on that question, or maybe the other ones as well. Mayor.
I most certainly echo the sentiments of Mayor Reed, but I bring your attention to this reality. This is a big issue. Anytime institutions or individuals see the devastation of life with the decisions they make, but they still stand on that decision, you have to understand that this is a very big deal. And for Mayor Reed and Mayor Perkins to step forward and say enough is enough. This press conference is a big deal. Somebody needed to step forward to say that we really need to look at something different. If we don't know what that is, then we need to try to figure that out. I've determined the best way to find solutions is by listening. And that's what I'm advocating, that we listen to the people who are in their homes, hiding under their beds when these rapid gunfires go off in our neighborhoods, that we listen to mothers and fathers who are burying their children, and that we listen to those folks who, there are literally folks who are afraid to go to church because they're afraid that somebody with an automatic weapon is going to come in there and spray up that house of God. There's something seriously wrong here. And we're going to have to engage our medical professionals, our psychologists and psychiatrists, our sociologists. Everybody needs to come to the table because all of us have a piece of the solution. The thing that's really troubling is I'm not one that says that we don't need silos. Everyone has a role to play. But every now and then you need to come out of your silo, come together in the room and have the conversation so that your piece is actually having a positive impact on the overall goal. And I don't think there's anybody who is engaged in this conversation, whether it's NRA or the Baptist Ministers Association. I don't think anybody wants to see people die from guns. So we really need to find out what are those touch points. What else can we do to move the needle? What President Biden did, move the needle. It's not enough. I appreciate the fact that he was able to push that forward. Appreciate the congressional support they got. Not enough. We still need to do more, and that's what I'm advocating. And if at least if we can't come to a consensus on some of the basic tenets of this issue, at least we'll have a good understanding of everybody's why.
Next question. Guns have been part of the American fabric, just intrinsic in our culture since as apple pie. I owned a gun at 10, 11 years old, 22, a little 22 when I was shooting in the woods and stuff like that. We are leaving out of this conversation the big problem here. First of all, you put a gun on the table, it don't bother anybody. It is the people that carry the guns that do the damage. Are we doing enough to change the paradigm, the cultural paradigm of some of our communities? Because again, there are people who get killed in accidents with cars every day, and we're not talking about taking the cars off the road.
I appreciate your question, but when I say we need to invite everyone to the table, that includes those parents, that includes the community, that's everybody. Everybody needs to come to the table and accept our responsibilities. Everyone needs to come to the table and explain their why. What I'm hearing in the community at the ground level is that in this season, there are many parents who are afraid of their 13 and 14-year-old who's toting an automatic rifle. There's something inherently wrong with that. And whether people actually understand the why of that mother, why is she allowing that to happen in her home? We need to listen to her and not point fingers at her. There are some things, when I say it, psychologists and psychiatrists and sociologists, I'm talking about the breadth and the scope of our communities, of our nation. We need to listen to each other because we got a problem here that's killing folks. Yes, sir. Okay.
It's the question for both of you. Is there a timeline that you all want to start this listening session?
Well, I think in my statement I indicated that the details of this we've not scoped. What we've come to is a consensus that it needs to happen. And so the next step is, I know I'm going to leave a card of a member of my staff that I've already given the responsibility to facilitate this for the city of Selma. And then at that point, we'll begin to sit down and have the conversations. Because this is not a Montgomery issue, this is not a Selma issue, it's not an Alabama issue, I suspect that there are people in all states that are really going to have an interest in this. I think this thing is probably going to grow faster than we anticipated. At least that is my hope, that we can really bring sufficient people together. I'm adamant about bringing our children into this conversation. This needs to happen. We should not have, our babies should not be afraid to go to school. Something's wrong, folks. We got to do something about this, and we can't expect our principals to be police officers. We cannot expect our society to get better if there's no respect for authority. These men and women in uniform, they catching hell. I'm just trying to keep this thing real. I didn't come to waste time. I came here for the specific purpose to try to initiate, to light a fire, to strike a match, to begin a conversation that would lead to solutions. Not interested in symptoms. Interested in identifying the problem and solving it.
Mary, if I could, real quick, can we ask Chief Albert a question?
Let me take this question real quick as well. I think it's important to understand this is not a one and done scenario that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we invite all stakeholders to the table and that we are having more consistent conversations around policy, around programming, and around solutions that we can implement. That's not going to happen in one mass meeting, if you will, or large discussion. There has to be, and what Mayor Perkins and I have talked about, is a commitment to this, because what we may have to do again is we may have to take this to the State House in the next legislative session. But in between that time, there are things that we want to hear from those in the community of what we can do right now. Is it more direct pathways to job and workforce opportunities? Is it more assistance in healthcare to getting those who may have a diagnosis or maybe undiagnosed because they can't get to a doctor to deal with anger management or to deal with some other issue that they may have? How do we find that balance, and who do we make sure we're listening to? And I think that's everyone. Schools are a big part of this. I think the private sector, as I mentioned earlier, has to play a role in this, and the community itself has to play a role in this, and those that are most likely to be impacted. And those are most likely black men. And I think we need to say that. We have to make sure that those black men in particular who feel like this is the only path they have, how do we find an off-ramp for them so that they get back onto the right path to be productive for themselves, for their family and friends and their community. And I think that's the conversation that Mayor Perkins and I have had. This is going to have to be the last question. I'm going to turn over to Chief Albert, but again, I just want to thank everybody for their efforts in being here. And once Chief Albert concludes, if there are any other questions you have for Mayor Perkins or myself, we can take those, and that'll be it. But just want to thank everybody again.
Chief Albert, if you can, you've been in law enforcement for a long time. It seems like the temperature in the country has changed. If you can, talk about the difficult conversations y'all are having in law enforcement about this epidemic.
Well, what we see, and the mayor talked about it just a bit, is the lack of conflict resolution and de-escalation from young men, typically a lot of folks that know each other. Back in the day when there was discussions, when you had a difference or disagreement, those discussions no longer exist. It's handled with gunfire. And we see that throughout our community. And what that does with law enforcement is it's taxing on the resources. It's taxing to continually go to these same locations with the same persons involved to kind of put those fires out. But, we talked about non-fatal shootings being on an increase. Absolutely. One of the things that we did, we see a decrease in the number of firearms arrests that we're making simply because of that permitlessly carry law that's in place now. So we're down, just here in the city of Montgomery, about 100 arrests on that. That's about 100 fewer arrests of individuals carrying guns that should not have been carrying guns. And of course, that's guns in the community. You know, we kind of heard the notion just now, if you have the gun sitting out there on the table and nobody's touching it, then it's just a gun. You're right. It's in the hands of wrong individuals. They're on our streets. We're seeing it every day. We're contacting people out there on the street every single day that should not be dealing with these guns. So conflict resolution, de-escalation, it's all but gone in a sense. And that's why I think it's so important to have these kind of conversations and the conversations that we planning to have with community members, families, the clergy, and all members of the community to try to get this on the table and settle that. You know, again, it's taxing on our resources. It's taxing on the communities and the neighborhood organizations that's calling us and emailing us day in and day out with the complaints of issues concerning gun violence in their communities, and we're feeling it on the law enforcement side as well.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Just one more thing. Chief Wolfer, do you have anything you want to just add in terms of what we're doing in Selma right now as it relates to some of the strategies that we're putting in place? I said I would not, but I will just go ahead and let you share just a little bit.
In Selma, what we have done is partnered not just with local but state organizations to kind of help beef up some of the patrols, conduct more traffic stops, not just with the police department but with the sheriff's office, and that is working in our favor. And I appreciate the state and I appreciate the sheriff's office for assisting us, and because like it's been said, it's going to take all of us working together. It's not going to happen overnight, but we want to make sure that we do all that we can to make sure that our citizens, not in Selma but just in Montgomery, feel safe. And if that means taking, pulling over cars, seeing a lot of lights in your neighborhoods, shining lights in the residents when the citizens are at work, we want to do all we can to make sure that you feel safe when you're not at home and you're at work and you have your phone and you're watching your home because you got a camera system there. So like I said, we're partnering not with the sheriff's office, with the state and other local and law enforcement federal agencies.
Again, thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
You have been listening to a news conference, joint news conference with Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed and Selma Mayor Perkins for about the last 45 minutes or so. Both mayors speaking on the rising gun violence, not only in the Montgomery and Selma area, but it's a national issue. I want to kind of give you a little bit of a recap here on what the two mayors and the police chiefs from both of those cities said. It started off with Mayor Perkins. He said that he didn't want to start rattling off any numbers or any specific crimes to address, but he did say that he wanted to speak to the frustrations and the setbacks of his community regarding gun violence. He said that he said we, as in everybody, police officers, city governments, federal governments, everybody, we, what we're doing is not working, he said, citing 14 murders in the last 6 months in the city of Selma alone. He said 13 of those 14 homicides were the result of gun violence. Mayor Perkins puts a lot of the blame for the situation, the rising violence, on permitless carrying, of course, a controversial topic between those who support the Second Amendment and those who would like to see more guide rails, I guess you could call it. He says that it's making it harder to get illegal guns off of the street in his city and elsewhere. He said that they have not done a good job of listening to victims, and he wants to, quote, press pause and listen to those victims. He says that he himself decided to sit down and have a private conversation with a person that he did not name, a Second Amendment supporter, and he said what he came away from the conversation with the person that he was speaking with was that the person did not want him or the government to take away his Second Amendment rights. He did not want to be disarmed, as the mayor said, and the mayor said, now that I've listened to you, please listen to me. And the mayor said, you know, I'm a gun owner as well. And I don't want to take away your guns. I want to take away the firearms that criminals are using. And so the mayor of Selma says this this is a small start, and that he was trying to find a way to kind of broaden the conversation. So he says the first thing that he did was called Montgomery's mayor, Mayor Stephen Reed, for several different reasons. And he said that they want to come to a consensus. They want to invite local, state, federal business leaders, faith leaders. They want to invite people to the table, and they want to talk about not the problem, but they want to talk about the victims. They want people to sit down and listen to what the victims of gun violence have to say. Mayor Perkins did not have any specifics on a meeting or a platform that would immediately happen. He said that this is in the early stages, and that basically this is the starting point. They want to open the dialogue to get something started. He says that they want to work to pull people together to get that started. After Mayor Perkins spoke, Mayor Reed spoke for a few minutes, and he said that basically that this is an opportunity to reach out to people in backgrounds all around the region to address the issue of gun violence. You know, as we started this press conference, WSFA 12 News pushed out a story 10 minutes before this news conference started about 2 people shot in Montgomery, fatally shot last night. And at the moment, our newsroom is working on, and we don't have it confirmed yet, but we're working on another possible shooting in Montgomery that may also be fatal. We'll have more information on that as soon as we possibly can get it. But Mayor Reed says that the federal government, President Biden, they have done a lot, in his opinion, to kind of move the needle. President Biden, of course, last year signing a gun violence bill into law that Mayor Reed says is a good step, but it is not all that they can do. He believes that it's a move in the right direction, but there's much more that needs to be done. The mayor, of course, pushing for a host of reforms, background checks, many other different ideas to kind of curtail the gun violence in his city and other cities around the state and the country. He says that and Mayor Reed is also putting some of the blame on the rise in gun violence on permitless carry policies that have been enacted in the state. He says that they are seeing non-fatal shootings, not just deadly shootings, but non-fatal shootings up 40% in the Montgomery area, although gun arrests are actually down. The mayor says that the city of Montgomery has taken 900 guns off the street through multiple different buyback programs, but that is still not enough. There are still more guns out there that the city and law enforcement needs to get out of the hands of people who are criminals. He says that another issue is that a lot of people who are committing these violent acts lack the ability to go through conflict resolution. In other words, a situation where you should be able to talk your way through the issue that you're having with somebody leads to gun violence and ultimately somebody either being shot or somebody being killed. So that is certainly an issue that the mayor says that has to be addressed as well. He says that the city of Montgomery has created the Office of Violence Prevention to be proactive. It goes door to door, tries to talk to people in the community, understand what's happening in the community, so that if there's a situation that could potentially brew into violence, that hopefully they can get out in front of it. But that is certainly an area that the city of Montgomery is working on. The mayor, of course, reiterating what Selma Mayor Perkins said. He wants to work with Crime Stoppers, with faith leaders, with business owners, just different people in the community to kind of come together and try to find ways of reducing violence, creating safe spaces for people, getting more officers engaged in the community, and ultimately hiring and recruiting more officers who can get out on the streets as well. It is about 3:50. We've got about 10 minutes until WSFA 12 News First at 4 starts. For now, I'm John Shryock, and I'm going to send you back to Local News Live. We will have much more on this topic coming up in about 10 minutes.